Today I'm going to show you how I make a pair of 1/4 or 3/8 bolt tongs from 11 inches of 1/4 by 3/4 flat bar. Okay? We're going to use the KA75 striking hammer over here. We're going to use the 110-pound Beaudry or 100-pound Beaudry behind me, because that's the way I make tongs. I don't make them by hand. I can make them by hand, but I couldn't make any money if I make them by hand. So I'm going to show you how I make them. You can translate this over to making them by hand if you want. With this light of stock, you can make them by hand pretty quickly, really. So we're going to get on with this. We'll start out with the layout. I'll show you a quick idea of the layout, and then we'll go over the tooling and we'll go from there. So let's get started. So what we're starting with here is a piece of 1/4 by 3/4 flat bar, mild steel. Just going to show you, give you a brief idea of how we're going to lay this out. The first 1 inch, we're going to leave the original width. We're going to come back 1 inch, and then we're going to fuller for 1.5 inches. We're going to fuller this down to about 3/8 of an inch thickness, which will be approximately half the width of the stock. Okay, once we get that done, we're going to leave about 1 inch of material, the original thickness, and then we're going to go on the other side and we're going to fuller this down from here to the remaining 7.5 to make a range for our tong. So this is the bit, this is the boss, and this will be the range for a total length of 11 inches. Okay, this is the tooling we're going to use on the KA75. This is their stock tong die. I've taken it and I've modified it to fit a mounting plate for the power hammer, so I don't have to hold on to it while I'm using it. I've added a stop back here, which is exactly 1 inch from here to the edge. Okay. When we first put it in there, we're butted up against there, and that'll give us our 1 inch for our bit. It'll also, at the same time, this is 1.5 inches wide. It'll start fullering the 1.5 inches, which will end up being about 3 inches. Then once we get the shank, I guess, once we get it forged, then we'll turn it back up to where the end of the shank is right even with our piece here, and that'll give us our 1 inch for our boss. And after that, we can start fullering the range for our tongs. That's all. First, we want to run the blank up against the stock, and then we fuller down to start our shank. Then we turn it on the side and we return it to the original thickness that it was, and we go back and forth working both ways. Now we get a stop block and we ensure that our 1/4 inch thickness stays the same. Now when we bring it out this time, we just want to continue working our shank. One side to the other, keeping our 1/4 inch thickness the whole time. Now, if we take a look at it, you'll notice that we went from 11 inches to about 13 inches. So now we bring the front of the boss right up to the front of the stop, and that gives us our 1 inch distance for our boss. Now we do the same thing we did before. We work that back and forth from one plane to the other. Now take note that we did start that fuller from the opposite side that we forward our shank from. That's very important. It must be forward from the opposite side. Now we're going to move it over to the Beaudry, and we're going to finish drawing out the reins. The Beaudry is good for this kind of work. It's a 100-pound hammer, and it can move a lot of metal quickly. This usually takes me 2 heats. The first heat is to get it close to the size we want it, and then the second heat we'll finish it up and we'll finish the taper on our reins. Now we're going to get our kiss block or stop block out, and we're going to ensure that we have our 1/4 inch thickness on the side. I don't worry a whole lot about whether we're 3/8 or not. Now that we have our blank forged, now we want to split the bit. A lot of people use chisels to start the slit in the bit. I find it easier for me to take a cutoff wheel on a 4.5 inch grinder and start the initial slit. That way I know that I'm in the center of the bit. It's just something that makes it easier for me. It seems like when I try to do it with just a chisel, it gets off sides for me. So this is the way I do it. I don't go very deep. We're only looking at maybe 1/4 inch, if even 1/4 inch. There's a close-up of what it looks like. Now I take a carving block and I take a slitting chisel and I take a wider chisel. It's not quite a 90. But it's a fairly wide chisel, and I start with the slitting chisel, bring the piece up to a good heat, I bring it out and I put it in the carving block. That way the bit can't move on me while I'm slitting it. I've seen people just clamp the bit in a vise, and I've never had any luck with that. This is the best way for me to do it. Now I take the slitting chisel and I start opening that up and making it deeper. Doesn't take a whole lot to do it this way. A couple passes with the chisel and you have the initial depth. There's a picture of it. That's the first opening with the chisels. Now we're going to put it back in the fire and bring it out, and this time I'm going to use the wider chisel to open it up the width that I want to open it up. On this pass, we're not really trying to make it deeper, we're just trying to bring the slit wider. And that's all that takes. Now we're going to take the carving block out. There's a close-up of it. Okay, we're going to take the carving block out, and we're going to bring the piece back out of the forge. We're going to put the bit in the vise with a little bit sticking up from the vise, and then we're going to hammer the shank back at about a 70-degree angle from the bit. Now we're going to bring it back out of the heat. Now we're going to put the boss in with a little bit proud of the vise, and we're going to hammer it back at a 70-degree angle or so. Take it to the anvil, kind of straighten it out, get everything lined up, and there we have it. Now, put it back in the forge, bring it out, cool the end of it. That's very important. You have to cool the bit before you start bringing it around the horn of the anvil. Keep everything straight as you go. It takes a few times to get comfortable doing this, but after you've done a couple, it's not really that bad. Now, there it is. Now we lay it back up on top, and we take the other side and we start it over the horn of the anvil. We do it the exact same way, trying to make them match. You'll notice here in a little bit, you'll see me comparing the two, trying to get them to match. Now you want to be careful that you don't mash that bit where you just split it. You want to stay off the bit. Now I'm comparing the two. I've cooled them. And all I'm doing now is minor adjustments. I'm not trying to really forge. I'm just doing minor adjustments. With this being mild steel, it's not a problem. There they are. They match reasonably well. They're straight. When I go to rivet these together, I drill the holes. I don't punch them. It's just quicker for me to drill them. So what I do is I come up here and I look at where the rein and the boss are half and half, and then I come half this way. I center punch it and I drill my first hole. Once I have the first hole drilled, then I lay it on top of the second. Piece, and using a layout punch, I mark it again, which leaves a faint mark, and then I center punch it, and then I drill it, and that gives me the two halves. Okay? Then we put the rivet in there. We come over here. We come 3/8 off of our piece because we were using a 1/4 inch rivet. So we went in 1.5 inches times the diameter of the rivet. So we want to go 3/8, and we cut it, and then we put it underneath the KA, and we set the rivet. And that's how we do the joint. Okay? So here's our two pieces, and there's our rivet. We put the rivet in from the bottom, and we put the right hand over the left one. That's the way I always do it. Now we take the rivet and the pieces, we set it on the die, we spread it a little bit, and we set the rivet. Check our alignment, hit it again. Now in order to line your tongs up, first thing you want to do is you want to work them a little bit and get that jaw worked. Then you want to bring them up and you want to put your stock that you want to hold, in this case 1/4 inch stock. You want to set it over here in the vise. We put it in the vise, and then we spread our handles where we want our handles to be. Now while we got it in the vise, we want to take it, we want to make sure everything lines up straight. They're straight that way, and they're straight that way. So if you look at them, they're straight that way, and they're straight that way. Our handles in the back, if you can see it, our handles overlap in the back. Good comfortable grip. Now the one thing I think you missed, I think we missed putting the jaws, or the notches in the jaws, and all I did was I heated that up, and I put this piece of 1/4 inch square stock in there, and I drove down with my hammer to make those notches. That's how we made those notches. So there's our 1/4 inch tongs. They started out from 11 inches of 3/4 by 1/4 flat bar stock mild steel. I think they turned out rather nice. So the only thing left to do with them now is to put a mark on them. And here we have the finished tongs, complete with the maker's mark. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you got some use out of it. If you did, please like it and share it. Tell your friends about it. Like I said, these are made from mild steel. You can take the same steps I used with a power hammer and you can convert them to a hammer and anvil. With the 3/4 by 1/4 inch stock, it's not too hard to move with a hand hammer, and they do make a real nice pair of tongs. So you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.